If you look at weapons, look at guns, look at power, look at status. When you have a lot of power, it's easily corrupted. You're tempted to use it for bad as well as good. And marketing, it's a powerful skill to have. It gives you the power of influence.
So how do you actually approach it? Do you have a framework for that? How you approach marketing, messaging in particular, to also come off trustworthy?
Argumentation and rhetoric. Winning someone over to your way of thinking. Employ logical reasoning. When you do that, you automatically assume that the other person is capable of understanding an argument. So you're treating that person as if they can make informed decisions for themselves.
Where is AI playing a role in this whole copywriting game?
We treat the AI as sort of a debate partner, poking holes in our offering. Like you were asking, hey AI, here's me, here's my competitor. Do you see us as the same?
All right, Billy, welcome to the show.
Hey, Youssef, thanks for having me.
Very cool. Today we want to talk about the topic of simple marketing, whatever that means, for smart people. But before we jump into that, can you give the audience a little bit of a background? Like, who are you, Billy, and what have you been working on before actually writing a book on that topic of simple marketing for smart people?
Yeah, so my background is definitely not in marketing, not in sales, not in marketing, not in entrepreneurship. I have more of an academic background, which is really where that name comes from. So I came out with this book recently, Simple Marketing for Smart People. And it's really for people more like myself who have more of an academic background, more bookish people, more nerdy people, if you want to call us that, but who live in this time where in the past, I'd be in a company, and that's where I was. But in this time, we can be solopreneurs. We can do our own thing. It's so easy to be an entrepreneur these days. So that's what I decided to do. So I have a science degree and I worked in the clean energy field. I think I was doing some stuff. I read your background, mechanical engineering, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so thermodynamics, energy production, electricity, things like that. That's what I was doing. Solar, wind, coal plants, that sort of thing. But that was fun, but it was limiting because I really couldn't grow in the company and they were telling me what to do every day. And I'm kind of a rebel. I didn't like that. I wanted to do my own thing. So I started a beer brewing website on the side. Us engineering minded people love to brew beer. So I started doing that on the side and eventually was able to leave that job by selling beer brewing courses over my website. So that's what got me into marketing. So I had sort of a formal marketing background through school. I got my MBA, but that's a much different type of marketing that they teach you than the type of marketing you need to grow an online business. They don't really teach you selling. They don't teach you copywriting, negotiation, anything like that. So I had to learn those skills on my own to leave my job and make this beer website a reality. And fortunately was able to do that and then really fell in love with this thing called marketing. And was able to start helping other people do that. Other smart people who had really good products, coaching programs, courses, service providers. They're really good at what they do, but that was also a double-edged sword. And you've probably heard and your listeners have probably heard of the curse of knowledge. Well, that can bite you in a lot of areas, and it can really bite you in marketing because when these smart people went to turn from delivering their product to now marketing their product or service, they really just confused their prospects. They would lose them in the details of what they do. So my gift is really making the complex simple. And I was able to come in, understand what they were doing and say, oh, I see what your product is. Let's explain it like this. And when we would do that, we would get really good results. So that brings me to where I am today.
Mm-hmm. Super interesting background, Billy. When I first read the title, I saw the video from you and Tiago, where you explain kind of the book, what it's all about, the topic of marketing and sales. And when I read the title first, like Simple Marketing for Smart People, obviously I get the smart part because as engineers, we tend to talk a lot about features, about the technicalities of a product or a service that we offer. But why simple marketing? Is it because there's so much noise out there? Because a lot of people, and I have my own consultancy, they want to try TikTok and LinkedIn and email marketing and whatever it might be. Do you think there's just too much out there, too much noise, and people don't actually get what really works for them?
Yeah, well, from engineering, they're all about leverage. And, you start to think in those terms. How can I get the most bang for my buck, the most output for my input? And so that's how I went into marketing, with that kind of a mindset coming from the energy industry. And so I looked at all these things that I was doing in marketing because I tried everything. I mean, I funnel building and Facebook ads and Google ads and copywriting and all the software that's available. It's a broad field. Marketing is an extremely broad field. And me, with this mindset, looking for leverage, said, okay, well, all things can't be created equal. So what's the one thing that I put an ounce of energy into and I get 2 or 3 ounces of results out of? And that was copywriting for me. That was copywriting. So it was the words. And I said, look, if we just change, we can fiddle around with plugins and software and all this stuff. But I always found the biggest leverage was in changing the words that I used in my marketing material. And so that's where this idea of simple comes into play. If there's one thing you can do, what is that one thing that moves the needle? And that's why the topic of the book is about dialing in your core marketing message. So out of all this, yes, like you said, all the overwhelm, all the complexity, the broadness of marketing, all the shiny tools and tactics and all that, all this multiplicity, the flip of that, going from the many, the flip of that would be the one thing. And what I found was that one thing is dialing in your core messaging. And the way that we really bring it to a head in the book is by asking this question: what does my customer need to believe in order to buy? And so one question, but if all you do is throw all your energy into answering that one question, everything downstream takes care of itself.
That makes sense. I'm wondering, there's some people that might feel that marketing and sales are deceptive, maybe sometimes a bit icky. Why do you think people think about marketing that way, or even potentially sales that way? Is it because of kind of societal indoctrination, or is it because of people told them it's like that, or maybe movies we've seen, a Wolf of Wall Street, for example? Like, how do you think that perception came up in the first place?
Well, because there's so many bad examples of it, and because there are so many charlatans and fake gurus and con men out there. There's a ton of that. And it's not surprising, because if you look at anything that's powerful, so if you look at marketing, if you look at weapons, look at guns, look at power, look at status, like the role of a king or a president, right? When you have a lot of power, it's easily corrupted. You're tempted to use it for bad as well as good. And marketing, and especially copywriting, it's a powerful skill to have. It gives you the power of influence. And look, there's a lot of bad people out there. I mean, no one's perfect, right? But there's a lot of people who find these tools and they want to use them for ill. And so we see a lot of that. And then but the mistake we make, though, is we blame marketing instead of the person using marketing poorly. Because at the end of the day, we have a choice in how we use this tool. It's not like we're forced to do deceitful marketing. We have a choice in how we use it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big part of the book too. And I'm really not a fan. There's different approaches to marketing, and I'm really not a fan of that approach to marketing. The deception, over the past few decades, it's been a lot with neuroscience and like teaching people how to like hack the brain chemicals. I'm not a fan of that either. Our approach, it's more of an intellectual approach. I mean, I believe that, it sounds kind of cheesy, but you know what the golden rule is. Treat others how you want to be treated, right? It's like the one thing that all the major religions have in most common. They all have that in their doctrine. And so I follow that, and I try to follow that in my life, and I try to follow that in my marketing. And so I don't want to be lied to in marketing. I don't want to have a countdown timer on a page that expires and just resets again. Like, I don't want to be treated like that, like I'm a fool. So I don't treat other people like that. And through my marketing teaching, I teach people not to treat other people like that. Treat people as if they're intelligent, as if they're capable of critical thinking, and as if they can make informed decisions for themselves. So you can use marketing badly, but you have a choice. And I hope that everyone listening to this chooses to use it for good.
Absolutely. I love that approach, Billy. There was one quote I actually got out of the video from you and Tiago, which is from David Ogilvy from 1955, which he subsequently put into a book like, "The customer is not a moron. She's your wife. Don't insult her intelligence and don't shock her." I think that that resonated so much, but I think a lot of people have this kind of churn and burn mentality where it's like quick win, like you get a spike, you get a lot of revenue, and then they don't really care about their product, their service, their reputation. So how do you actually approach it? Do you have a framework for that? How you approach marketing, messaging in particular, to also come off trustworthy?
Yeah, so I try to start with at the high level, right, with the moral approach and the worldview, because your tactics have to flow from that, right? Like if you go into it thinking that, oh, like I'm just gonna screw people over, then you're gonna use tactics that align with screwing people over, right? So I start with that approach, market to others how you want to be marketed to, and it's like, okay, well, what approaches can we use towards marketing that would fit that? And then you rule out all the deceitful ones. And to me, I rule out the ones too that are all about neuroscience and hacking brain chemicals and all that stuff. And so what I found, the approach that I found fits, that aligns beautifully with this approach to marketing, is argumentation and rhetoric. And so I'm a big fan of history. I've studied the ancient Greek philosophers. And I mean, it's funny that, we've forgotten all these things. And we try to come up with these new solutions, but the solutions have been around for thousands of years. I mean, Aristotle came up with this, like 5th century BC. And so when you take this approach of argumentation, so not argue like, getting in a fight with someone like on the side of the road because they cut you off, but honest arguments, rhetoric, making claims and backing them up with proof, winning someone over to your way of thinking. When you do it that way, when you employ logical reasoning, then when you do that, you automatically assume that the other person is capable of understanding an argument. And so automatically you're treating that person as if they're intelligent, as if they can make informed decisions for themselves. So that's really the broad approach that we take in the book, is this approach of rhetoric and argumentation. Which is really it's funny because a lot of copywriters don't even know the field that they're operating in. They think copywriting is like sort of its own thing, sort of like off to the side, but it's really just rhetoric at the end of the day, what they're employing.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that you mentioned is like ethos, pathos, and logos, right?
Yes. Yeah. Those are Aristotle's 3 categories of proof, evidence to back up your claims.
Yeah. You talked about the assumption. I want to go back to the assumption bit, because I feel like when people listen to this podcast, I want to take some practical tips from it. I feel like, yes, you can dumb it down, but sometimes as marketers, we make assumptions of what the other person might think or our prospect might think about our product or service. But I feel like, where's the balance? As engineers, if we promote a product, a SaaS product, for example, a technically very complex product, how much do you dump it down, but not have it too dumbed down in order to make it still credible enough so that engineers actually believe you? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't think about it. I get how you can see it as dumbing it down. I think about it as simplifying. Mm-hmm. And not even simplifying. Even the word simplifying can be sort of a synonym for dumbing it down. When I think of simplifying, it's about the word compressed comes to mind. So you think about, there's a great quote from, I think it's Winston Churchill. He wrote a colleague of his overseas a letter and said, "Sorry, I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time." And so it's like part of the creative act where you expand and then you distill. So if you're writing something, you write like this book I just wrote, I wrote a ton, like many more pages than what's in the final book, but I distilled it down to its essence. And what that means when you distill something down, the simplistic form of simple would be, okay, it's something very simple, but you can't unpack it. Like what you see is what you get, but there's no depth there. The simple I'm talking about is the simple that you can unpack. You think about Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared, right? How many variables are in that? Just a few, right? Like, there's not a lot of ink on the page for that equation. Yet there have been books and books and books written about that one equation. So it's a simple equation, but nobody would call it simplistic or definitely not dumb. So that's what you want to do. The curse of the smart person is that when you get into a field, everything becomes distinctions. For you, it's probably hard for you to think about just engineering. To you, it's mechanical engineering and power engineering and industrial engineering and all these different types of engineering. But for someone who doesn't know the field, it's just engineering, which might drive you crazy because you only see the nuances. But you have to simplify to meet people where they are, if that's where their mindset is, knowing that word engineering can be unpacked into all these different subfields.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm wondering, from a messaging, or like when you define your marketing thesis, let's say you start over with your marketing, you've been doing some marketing in the past, but you want to work with Billy in this case to work on messaging. How do you actually get started to maybe adopt or tweak the messaging?
How do you get started? Well, what we start with is the approach I recommend is, and what we do, whether I'm consulting or through our programs, you know how, and your listeners will probably be familiar with a brand manual. So this is a document. Typically, you hire a branding expert, and it can cost you a lot. You get a top branding expert. This might cost you $20,000, $30,000 or more to create this thing. And so what you do is you create this brand manual, and it has your visual identities in there. So your logo, your colors, your fonts, maybe some images that represent your brand. And it's that one-to-many relationship again, similar to taking a topic and splitting it, right? So you have this central brand manual, and then you distribute it, but no one sees that. Like, your customers never see your brand manual. What they see, they see the fruits of it. They see the downstream manifestation of it in your emails and on your Facebook page and your Instagram and everything like that. So that's more for the visual side and brands, right? Like, we have to identify who we're talking about here. And a big mistake I often see is that small businesses, of which are the majority of businesses in the US here and in the world, most businesses are small businesses. There's a different playbook for small businesses, and you don't want to act like a big brand. And so if you're like a solopreneur and you're taking lessons from Coca-Cola on branding in the hopes of growing your revenue and getting more clients and everything, it's just the wrong playbook. Like, you want to be more focused on the field of direct response marketing, and your listeners can look that up. And that's more about what we're talking about, which is Aristotle, making an argument for what you do, having a clear call to action, etc. So for that language, that persuasive language, your argument, we take the same approach though as the brand manual, where we first create our core marketing message, and then we can, once we dial that thing in, we can distribute that downstream to all those marketing assets, the emails, the landing pages, etc.
I see. Yeah. So you see marketing, Billy, more as education rather than indoctrination, which is maybe has a negative connotation. Would you say it's more education? And how much of maybe the distribution between marketing and sales do you think we spend on education, so the marketing side of things, versus the sales side of things?
Yeah, good question. I do see it as education. The way I would visualize it, for your listeners, the way I would visualize it is, think about concentric circles. So you have education in one circle, but that's within a larger circle, which is the argument that you're making. Because look, we are, at the end of the day, we're not just teachers. Like, our marketing includes education, but we're not just teachers. We are selling something. We're selling a product or a service. And so there's a convincing that needs to be done there, where the person on the other end needs to come to the conclusion that, oh man, that product or service is worth the price that they're charging. Ideally, it's worth many times the price that we're charging. So it's education, yes, but it's education within this argument, the argument being, hey, the price that I'm charging is far lower than the value that you're going to get. That's the argument that you're making.
I see. When you work on the messaging, maybe taking a step back, how do you ask maybe prospects or your customers on how you should be tweaking your message? Is it the right approach, or do you think the customers are already so biased using your product or service that collecting data points from your customers wouldn't make any sense? Or how would you approach this problem? Like, what questions would you actually ask to prospect or customers to tweak your own marketing messaging?
Well, it depends on who you're targeting. And this is really a key thing. So we have this term in the book called the chain of beliefs. And it has to do with the beliefs that people need to accept your product. And so people with a long chain of beliefs, they're very far away mentally. So anything that you talk about that's related to your offer to these people, about how quick your service is and your price, anything like that, it's not going to matter because they don't even have the basic beliefs to understand what you do and accept what you do. So what you need to do then is not talk about your product, not talk about your service. You need to talk about, and if they're very far away, talk about the problem that they're dealing with. Now, and then you can lead them. You can shorten their chain of beliefs by instilling the beliefs that they need to have. So you guys are on the same page. Now, if you're talking to someone who is maybe an existing customer of yours or client of yours, it's self-evident that they already have the necessary beliefs to buy because they've already purchased from you. So now those are going to be very different beliefs that you're going to have to instill in them. It might be about the benefits of signing a retainer with you, or maybe you sold them on project A and you have to sell them on project B now. So you have to really think about, this is a key thing, you have to really think about the group of people that you're talking to and where they are belief-wise. Do they have a long chain of beliefs or a short chain of beliefs?
Got it. That makes sense. What would you say are some of the mistakes that you have done on your marketing journey? I'm not talking about the book in particular, like what you mentioned in the book, but more like when you go back to the times where you did brewery, what have you done wrong? Where you would look back and say, okay, that was a stupid mistake. I shouldn't have done that with my knowledge right now.
Yeah, I fell into this trap that even today, I mean, I got started with the online marketing stuff and the beer brewing website. 2008, 2009 is when I first started getting into that. And even today, I see a lot of this where content marketing was very big back then. And everyone was saying blogging was the big thing. Twitter was just coming around. YouTube was just getting started. And everyone was saying, you got to create a lot of content. You got to post about your topic and all its subtopics. And if you put a lot of content out there, the law of reciprocity kicks in and they're going to be so happy with all your free content. They're going to wonder, well, what's the paid content that this person has? And that can work okay. I'm not saying that it doesn't work at all, but that was a mistake to follow that. It's slightly off. What you want to do instead is take this argumentation-based approach as opposed to this topic-based approach, because maybe your listeners can resonate with this. You know, if you have a listener right now who's cranking out content because all the experts are telling them to, but they're not seeing that translate into sales, they probably fell into the same trap that I did. And that type of content, that I was producing a lot of how-to content, so like long blog and technical tutorials and all that stuff. And I would get a lot of high fives for it, but that was about it. I mean, when it came to the product, it was mainly tire kickers. So people kind of showing interest, like, oh yeah, your course looks cool. I might sign up for that one day. And they never do. Or just freebie seekers, because that's what I've been giving them, right? So that's what they're used to. Like, oh, hey, you give me a detailed tutorial on that topic. Can you now give me one on this topic? And I'm like, yeah, but that's in the course, right? So it's tough. So what you want to do instead is not take that approach where you just blast out free content and hope people would buy. What you want to do is again, make an argument for your way of doing things. So if you think about it like objection handling, it usually clicks for people. So we think about objection handling typically at the point of purchase, like when a person's just about ready to buy and they have last minute objections, like, well, how long is this going to take? Or are we going to meet on Zoom or in person and all of that? For your listener, extend that objection handling idea way out to this person, that person with the long chain of beliefs where they don't even know who you are yet. They're still going to have objections, right? You can think about them as like boulders in their way. They're trying to make their way to you, but there's these boulders blocking their path. What your content becomes is not just content about your topic, but it's content that removes those objections, that moves those boulders. Because it just stands to reason that if you remove every single objection that your prospect has to buying from you, they're going to buy from you.
So you basically don't have to do the sale actively anymore because your marketing has already done the pre-work to make the sale happen automatically, so to speak. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, exactly.
Kind of.
Yeah. And that's what took me a while to realize was actually the goal of marketing. And it's summed up in this great Peter Drucker quote, the famous management consultant, where in his book, Management, he says, the goal of marketing is to make selling superfluous. Another word for unnecessary. So yeah, you nailed it. You do marketing right, selling becomes a heck of a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. So do you have any advice for people out there who might be churning out content, but it doesn't convert into sales? How should they get started with, should they do a website first? Should they work on content, blogging, X threads? What is your recommendation on how to get started in marketing?
Yeah, so I would start with the core message first. So identifying what those beliefs are. And by the way, not to pitch the book, but to pitch the book, this is exactly what we cover and that's why I wrote it, to answer that question that you just asked, how people get started. Because what I've seen working with over 300 clients over the past decade on their marketing is that the mistake they make is jumping into their website, jumping right into their email, jumping right into their Facebook page, instead of getting that core message dialed in first, unearthing those false beliefs that people have and the myths that they have and the misconceptions that they had, and then creating marketing material that addresses all those myths and misconceptions and false beliefs, and then distributing those downstream to those marketing channels. And when you take this approach, the marketing channels aren't very important anymore. There's many marketing channels out there, many ways to meet your prospects. Marketing channels die every day. New ones are born every day. Your core message that you send down those channels is what matters most.
That's super interesting. Never thought about it this way. When you talk about the messaging aspect, I think this is kind of an iterative process, right? So you don't say you have to nail it from the get-go, like in 1 week you have your messaging nailed down, but would you rather say it's more like an iterative process where you kind of, I don't know, ask the right questions to your prospects or customers and then adapt it accordingly? Or how does that work?
Definitely iterative. Yeah, that the document that you'll create where you have these beliefs that people need in order to buy, it's a living, breathing document. We tell the story in the book about my co-author, Tiago Forte. He's got an online course on productivity. It's called Building a Second Brain. Mm-hmm. And he had this, he ran this course, and he had all these academics come out in unison and get really upset with him because they believed that his course and his methodology, more specifically, was promoting plagiarism, because it has to do with note taking and clipping notes from blog articles and podcasts and things. And it's just not true. Actually, his system, it fights against plagiarism because it helps you keep track of all your sources, which people are really bad at. And so, but he couldn't just, one, he couldn't ignore that objection that people had. Two, he couldn't just make the claim, hey, you're wrong. This actually helps fight against plagiarism, because why should they just believe him and take him at his word? What did he have to do? We go back to Aristotle, right? And ethos, pathos, logos. He had to prove his claim, and he had different ways that he did that. I think what he actually did was a demonstration and showed how the system works and how you can cite your sources and everything. And the revolt was quelled, right? And they actually became some of his biggest fans, people who were revolting. And so that's a good example of, you have to just get content out there, and you're going to see the objections that people have. And I hope your listener now interprets those objections also as false beliefs. It's another way to look at it. And then what you do is you go back to your document and you say, okay, well, we need to address that. We need to say in our content somewhere that this actually helps fight against plagiarism. So if citing your sources is important to you and academic integrity, then this is the system for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have one question though, Billy, which is, let's say you have company A and company B. Let's say they work on the same messaging. They have the same product, same service, maybe a SaaS product, whatever it might be. How do you differentiate yourself from your competitors if you work on the same messaging, or if your product does the same?
There's almost always something that makes you different. And it kind of depends. It depends on the type of company you're talking about. It might be a little bit easier for me because I tend to work with people who are the face of their business. But, but I would even say that even larger companies should have someone who's the face of the business. And so if it's a person like let's say a service provider, you have an agency, right? So like you as the head of your agency, it's kind of cliche, but like we're all unique, right? We all have our own personal stories and everything. So like right there, you're different. Like, it's like, tell your story. I remember I was working with a very crowded market is language learning, and especially ESL, English as a second language. And so I was working with one client who was having that same problem, standing out. And this is exactly how we did it. We dug into her personal story, and what I learned was that she's a trained opera singer, and that actually has influenced the way that she approaches learning English, which has a lot to do with your mouth and the muscles in your mouth and how you shape your lips and your tongue and everything. She goes more in that direction than other people do because of her background as an opera singer. And you learn so much about using those muscles in that discipline. So I said to her what I've said to so many clients, which is, why aren't you saying this? And she started to weave that into her messaging. I mean, she sent out an email that had a picture of her singing on stage, and and she had a big audience. She has a big audience, and her customers haven't seen that before. And they're like, oh my gosh, right? So it does so many things, right? Like you bond with this person, you get to know them better, it humanizes them, you form a relationship with them. It's interesting. I mean, how many people are trained opera singers? And most importantly, to answer your question, it makes you stand out messaging wise. So it's a good question. And this is what copywriters have figured out over the years, is that in a market that's very saturated, where everyone's saying the same thing, what you do is you dig into your process and you find that thing that makes you different. And it's almost always there. The problem is you're so close to it that it's tough to see it, which is why it's beneficial to bring in other people to help you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see AI playing a role in this whole copywriting game? Because I feel like so many people are they don't actually learn the copywriting skill or the psychology behind copywriting, that they use large language models to write copy. That means everybody else becomes rather average. So how do you stand out as a copywriter? Do you have some practical tips for people out there?
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of AI, and I've been using it like crazy with my messaging framework. But I don't use it the same way that most other people are using it for copywriting, where you're right. They're using these LLMs, and they're jumping in and they're saying, well, I'm in excuse me, I'm an English teacher. Write me an email to sell my online course teaching ESL. And then what do you get? I mean, these models are trained on vast amounts of data, and you get the average of that, right? And most of the data out there, most of the copywriting out there is below average. So you get an average of below average copywriting. So it's really bad, right? So the way that we use copywriting is what I was telling you earlier. We take this argumentation-based approach into it, and we treat the AI as sort of a debate partner, poking holes in our offering. Like you were asking, like, hey, AI, here's me, here's my competitor. Do you see us as the same? And if it's like, yeah, like it's pretty much like you could just copy and paste your writing onto their website. It's the same thing, right? I was like, okay, well now I can try to overcome that. So that's how I see the best use of the LLMs. And yeah, I mean, there's so many uses, but what I wouldn't do is what I said earlier, which is just jump right into ChatGPT, say, here's my product, here's my customer, write me an email. You're going to get a very low quality product out of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. What would you say what is the stage after the messaging part?
Yeah, like I said, after too, because that's how I think about it, this upstream, downstream metaphor, where your core messaging is upstream and then everything else is downstream. Yeah, so you do eventually get to the point where you got your messaging dialed in, people are responding to it. Then it becomes, it depends on what your goals are. I mean, if your goal is to, what most of my clients' goals are, make more money, enroll more clients, enroll more customers. If you have a message that's working, then you double down on what works. So if you're doing paid advertising, then you put more money into paid advertising. Or if you're not doing it yet, you might try paid advertising. That's a common progression, is you get something working, meaning converting sales-wise with organic content. And then you say, okay, I'm feeling pretty good about this. We have a flow that's working. We're converting leads into customers, but we need to pour more fuel into the engine. Let's flip on Facebook ads and see if we can get an ROI there. So then that becomes the name of the game. And whoever can spend the most money to acquire a customer wins. So You look at how much money it's costing you to get a customer. You look at your lifetime value, and then it's just a numbers game and just turning those dials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Who would you say your book is not for?
Not for anyone thinking short term, and not for anyone looking for a quick fix. If you're in like a desperate situation, like you really hate your job and you're trying to get out, and if you're willing to take the long term approach, like I did. I mean, I didn't just leave my job overnight. I mean, it took me years of building this thing up on the side. So it's really good for people who have been burned before by those quick win sort of things, like make money overnight. But if you're still in that mode of looking for something that's quick, the book is not for you. But if you want to do something that is real and timeless and that helps you build a sustainable business that's going to last you and bring you clients and customers that will buy from you over and over again, not just once, then the book is a good fit for you.
Amazing. Any closing remarks, any last tips from your side, Billy, to the audience who want to maybe delve into marketing or try new tactics, new approaches?
Well, I would just say, if the icky side of, you have a lot of smart people who follow you and who listen to you. I assume more technical people like yourself.
Mostly technical people follow me, but we delve more into the marketing business side of things because I have my own agency. So I'm an engineer turned marketer. So most of the followers though are engineers.
Yeah. So your people are probably like me in that they don't resonate as much with the hype style of marketing, with the flash, sort of like the influencer style of marketing. I assume your people are more critical thinkers and more left-brained analytical types. I really found this field of argumentation and rhetoric and discourse a really good fit for how I think about things. And so I would encourage your listener to explore this field of making an argument. Look at how lawyers make an argument in a courtroom to sway a judge or a jury. And what I found is that people like me, and I assume like your listeners, people like that follow me too, and they really resonated with the style as well. They tell me that it gives them a lot more structure. It gives them something. It's like a puzzle for them to solve. And it's very hard to solve a puzzle when you don't have the pieces, but this approach gives you those pieces. So I'll leave your listener with that.
Yeah. Billy Broas, thank you so much.
Thank you, Youssef. Appreciate it.